President Trump's ongoing trip to Asia really underscores that the United States, despite all the ups and downs, continues to be a major player in the Asia-Pacific region. All eyes are really on what's going to happen next with the meeting on the sidelines of APEC between President Trump and President Xi Jinping of China. Tariffs, agriculture, minerals, so much is up in the air to be discussed. But I think we also all have to take a step back and think through how we got here, the ups and downs, and recognize the fact that these two senior leaders of the biggest economies in the world are meeting for the first time in person since President Trump came back into office. That is a good thing. So despite the ups and downs, the headlines that will kind of dominate all around the world, I think we should take heart that at least these two countries are coming together. Whatever happens with the ongoing negotiations, it'll all be about execution. Each country, promises one thing or another thing, but then it comes back to the real implementation of agreements. But bottom line, how great it is that these two leaders are meeting. And I think the world's attention is on this meeting on the sidelines with, again, the reality that it will be the follow-up that is so critical, including a potential formal state visit of President Trump to China next year. The timing of these ongoing meetings that we're all focused on between President Trump and President Xi Jinping is in many ways really driven by the annual cycle of these big summits. So President Trump has just come out of what for, most reports has been a very successful meeting related to the gathering in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, where Kuala Lumpur hosts what is called the ASEAN Summit. And so ASEAN is really 10, now 11 nations, including Timor-Leste, in Southeast Asia. But also we hear talk about ASEAN plus 3, ASEAN plus 6. So other big countries like the United States or China getting involved with the ASEAN leaders there. Out of those meetings that President Trump had with Southeast Asian leaders, again, the reports have been positive, but it all comes down to implementation again, where indeed perhaps tariffs will come down to lower levels as United States and individual ASEAN, Southeast Asian nations work out what is the arrangement going forward with regards to really this back and forth in terms of the tariff war. So the schedule has been driven by that ASEAN summit, which is then typically followed soon after by what is called the APEC summit. APEC for Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation. So these APEC leaders, these big economies of the world, gather next in Korea. And then in between these two big summits, President Trump has had it's almost like a love fest between the new first female prime minister of Japan and President Trump. So in between these two big meetings, President Trump has taken advantage of that time to go to Japan. And remember that the United States and Japan are actually formally allies. And so again, as you think about all this talk about, has the United States disengaged from Asia? Is China really the key focus of everyone in Asia? Clearly that is not the case. The United States is still very much an Asia-Pacific power. Let's not forget, even when we think about APEC, it includes the nations on the eastern side of the Pacific Ocean. And very clearly, this trip has underscored how much the United States is very much a player in the Asia-Pacific region. Trump-Xi meeting for me is just one more step, maybe a big step, but one more step forward in these relationships, in this tense relationship between China and the United States. It's all about trust building. As you think about it, clearly trust has eroded, not just under President Trump, but under President Biden and President Trump before then. But that relationship between the United States and China in many ways needs to be reset. So there is confidence that each side will live up to deals. Remember, in the first Trump administration, there was a big deal between the US and China with regards to economics and agriculture. China actually never fulfilled that deal. They never met up to their promises. But in China's defense, let's not forget there was a pandemic. So all those promises about agricultural products or other goods that China might have purchased and committed to purchase, given the pandemic, they were not able to or chose not to purchase using the pandemic as an excuse. But, again, that is the past. I think the United States president is always one that says, whatever's happened, let's look forward to the future and let's cut a deal. And so when I think about Trump 2.0, the second version of the Trump administration, there are already hints about the US president's priorities from the first, which is about trade, which is about business deals, which is about a more balanced relationship between the United States and its range of trading partners, including China. So this meeting hopefully, sets the stage for more progress. This Trump-Xi meeting, really it's on the sidelines of APEC, hopefully sets the stage for a more formal state visit by the US president to China. But at the end of the day, I say to everyone who asks me, it's great that these leaders meet, but it's also important at the next levels, not just in government, but in business and in civil society. There was a former president who had always talked about a pivot to Asia. I think the reality is the United States always remained engaged in Asia, but perhaps we do need more of a pivot to things like business ties, people-to-people ties, economic and trade ties, and away from just thinking through that it's only government is important. That's clearly definitely not the case. And I think this United States president has underscored to the world that American companies, American joint ventures, American partnerships with companies and businesses from other places of the world is also important to moving these relationships forward.